He told her she was nothing. In the sterile gray office of the divorce lawyer, Sebastian Shaw told his wife Elena that her life was over. He mocked her, laughed at her, and told her she'd be nothing without his money. He watched her walk out into the lobby alone and defeated, expecting her to call a cheap taxi. But Sebastian waited. He waited to see her final humiliation. He just never expected the car that pulled up. He never expected the man who stepped out. And he never expected that the wife he'd just discarded was the one holding all the power. The air in the 48th floor conference room of Stanton and Hicks was worth more than most people's cars. It was filtered, scrubbed, and chilled to a precise 68 degrees, carrying the scent of old leather lemon oil and the faint metallic smell of ruthless ambition. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline was a jagged gray cutout against a bruised November sky. The silence in the room was a living thing, broken only by the whisper of expensive suit fabric and the quiet snick of a gold-plated pen cap being opened and closed. Elena Petrova sat on one side of a vast mahogany table that reflected the sky like a dark, still lake. She felt like a ghost haunting her own execution. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Her coat, a simple practical wool coat from a department store, felt like a beggar's rag on the back of the $10,000 leather chair. Opposite her sat Sebastian Shaw, the man who had been her husband for 12 years, and "sat" was a generous term. He was lounging, radiating a smug, predatory confidence. His $8,000 Zegna suit was draped perfectly over his broad shoulders, his $30,000 Patek Philippe watch catching the cold light. He wasn't just in the room. He owned it. Beside him, his lawyer, a silver-haired shark named Mr. Crane, pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. Crane was the kind of man who had never lost, mostly because he only took cases that were already won. "And by signing here, Ms. Petrova," Crane purred, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that belied the venom in his words, "you acknowledge the lump sum payment of $50,000 as a full, final, and irrevocable settlement of all spousal support claims, present, future, and potential. You also waive any and all claims to Mr. Shaw's businesses, properties, holdings, and private collections, as enumerated in Exhibit A." Elena's own lawyer, a kind but spectacularly outgunned public interest attorney named Sarah Jenkins, flinched. Sarah's suit was polyester and her briefcase was worn at the corners. She looked, Elena thought, with a pang of guilt, like a rowboat next to a destroyer. "Sebastian, this is insulting," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. $50,000. After 12 years, Elena supported your career. She managed your homes, your social calendar. She gave up her doctorate so you could move to New York for your first big deal. Sebastian let out a short, barking laugh that bounced off the wood-paneled walls. He leaned forward, tapping his gold Mont Blanc pen, a gift she had given him for their 5th anniversary, on the table. "She gave up what?" he scoffed, looking at Crane as if they were sharing a private joke. "That doctorate, wasn't it? In God, what was it, honey?" He snapped his fingers, pretending to search for the word. "Ah, yes. Florentine pigment sourcing. Are you kidding me?" He turned his dismissive gaze on Sarah. "Let's be blunt, Sarah. Who cares what kind of dirt they used to make the color blue 500 years ago? It's useless. Utterly, completely useless. Just like the art blog she runs. Does that even pay for the internet?" He leaned back, spreading his arms. "Let's call this what it is, Charity. I'm saving her. I took her out of a dusty, rent-controlled apartment in Chicago and gave her a life she could never have dreamed of. She flew on private jets, she wore designer clothes, which, by the way, I'm letting her keep generously, and she ate at restaurants you can't even get a reservation at. This $50,000, it's a golden parachute, Elena. It's a gift." He gestured to the window at the city below. "It'll get you a studio in, I don't know, Queens, for a few months anyway. Before you have to, get a job? Can you even do that? What's the market rate for pigment sourcing?" Mr. Crane smirked. Sarah flushed a deep, angry red. "You're a monster, Sebastian," Sarah whispered. "I'm a realist." Sebastian shot back his good humor, vanishing, replaced by a cold, hard edge. "She is 38 years old. She has no skills. She has no connections. She has no value in the marketplace. I am giving her $50,000 more than she is worth. Now sign the paper, Elena. I have a 2 o'clock tea time at Winged Foot with the board of Apex Holdings, and I don't intend to be late." Elena's eyes drifted from his face, from the cruel, handsome twist of his lips to the large abstract painting on the wall behind him. It was a terrible fake, a poor imitation of a Clifford still, all jagged, meaningless edges and no soul. It was a painting bought by the pound, designed to impress clients who knew nothing about art but everything about its supposed price tag. Sebastian had bought it for $250,000 at a charity auction, boasting about it for weeks. Elena knew from one glance it was a studio knockoff worth perhaps $1,500. She had never told him. He never would have believed her. She closed her eyes, and a memory sharp and unwanted flashed in her mind. It was their 7th anniversary. She had just been offered a research fellowship at the Getty, the culmination of her Ph.D. work. She was ecstatic. She told him over dinner at Per Se. Sebastian hadn't even looked up from his phone. "Los Angeles," he'd said, scrolling. "I don't do L.A. Besides, I need you here. We're hosting the benefit for the new museum wing. You're in charge of the catering. Don't be selfish, Elena. Your little hobby can wait." It had waited. It had waited until it died. "Elena," Sarah's voice was soft, pulling her back. "We can fight. We can file for discovery. We can try to prove—" "And what will that cost, Sarah?" Elena asked, her voice a dry rasp. It was the first time she had spoken in an hour. "How many years? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that I don't have? I'll work pro bono, And he," Elena nodded at Sebastian, "will bury you in motions until you're disbarred. He'll bankrupt your little firm for sport. He's already done it." She looked at her husband. "You've already won, Sebastian. You won the day you met me." Sebastian's smile returned, broader this time. "See? She's smart after all. Just sign it, honey. Let's get on with our lives. Mine at least is going somewhere." Elena picked up the pen Sarah offered her. It was a cheap plastic ballpoint, its cap chewed. She looked at the signature line, Elena Shaw. With a slow, deliberate motion, she crossed out Shaw. She wrote her name, the name she was born with, the name she had forgotten. Elena Petrova. The ink was black and final. "There!" Sebastian boomed, clapping his hands together as he stood, a conquering hero. "It's done, freedom for both of us. No hard feelings, A.L." He didn't wait for an answer. He motioned to Mr. Crane, who was already packing a pristine leather briefcase that cost more than Elena's entire settlement. "Send the final bill to my office. And Crane, good work. Let's play golf soon." Sebastian walked to the door, buttoning his suit jacket. He paused, his hand on the heavy brass handle, and looked back at Elena. She was still sitting, her hands clasped on the table, a statue of defeat. "Oh, and Elena," he said, a final casual twist of the knife. "That art blog of yours, Aurelius's Attic, or whatever, I had my tech guy look at it. You have 12 followers. 12. It's pathetic. My dog's Instagram has 5,000. He smirked. "Just a piece of advice from someone who knows. Give it up. Nobody cares. You have nothing to say." He was gone. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the oppressive, expensive silence. For a full minute, neither Elena nor Sarah moved. Then Sarah reached out and put a hand over Elena's. "Elena, are you—" "I'm fine," Elena said. Her voice was surprisingly steady. The numbness was a shield. I need to go. Thank you for everything, Sarah." "The check will be mailed." Sarah said, her voice full of a pity that Elena found harder to bear than Sebastian's cruelty. "You can call me any time. Any time at all." Elena nodded, grabbed her simple cloth coat from the back of the chair, and walked out of the room. She didn't look at the fake painting. She didn't look at the view. She just walked. She walked past the row of associate offices, past the law library, and toward the elevator bank, her practical scuffed heel boots making no sound on the plush, mile-deep carpet. The elevator ride down was a descent into a different kind of hell. It was silent-mirrored and played a soft classical tune that made Elena want to scream. She clutched the strap of her worn leather handbag, the one Sebastian had always called her orphan bag. She stepped out into the lobby of Stanton and Hicks. It wasn't a room. It was an abyss. A 3-story atrium of white Calicut marble, brushed steel, and uncomfortable-looking leather sofas that no one had ever in the history of the building sat on. The only sign of life was a terrifyingly chic receptionist, a woman who looked like she had been carved from ice, sitting behind a desk that resembled a fragment of a glacier. Her name, according to the small, severe plaque on her desk, was Ms. Vane. Ms. Vane looked up as Elena approached, her expression a perfect, polite mask of disinterest that was somehow worse than open mockery. She judged in a single millisecond Elena's coat, her bag, her lack of jewelry, and her rain-dampened hair, and dismissed her as irrelevant. Elena walked toward the revolving glass doors, pulling her coat tight. It was raining outside, a hard-driving November rain that turned the taxis on Park Avenue into frantic yellow blurs. She'd have to wait. She moved to the side, standing near a towering leafless plant in a steel planter, trying to become as small and invisible as possible. She pulled out her phone. The battery was at 14%. She opened the Uber app, her fingers shaking slightly. Connecting. The app spun. And spun. The signal in the marble and steel canyon was terrible. No cars available. She tried Lyft. Connecting. Ding. Elena's heart seized. She didn't have to look. She could feel the sudden magnetic pull of his arrogance sucking the air out of her corner of the lobby. Sebastian emerged from the elevator bank, adjusting his perfect silk tie. He saw her. Of course he saw her. He had an animal's instinct for weakness, and right now she was broadcasting it on every frequency. He sauntered over, a lazy, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Oh, you're still here, tough getting a cab in this weather, I guess." Elena said nothing, just stared at her phone, at the useless spinning wheel. Come on," she whispered to the machine. "What's the plan, Elena?" He pushed, clearly enjoying this. He was in no hurry. His tea time was a lie. It was pouring. This was his entertainment. He wanted to watch the final pathetic scene of her defeat. "Waiting for the M train. I hope you have a Metro card. Or is that part of the settlement?" He chuckled at his own joke. "Don't tell me you can't even afford an Uber." Elena's face flushed. She jammed her phone back into her bag, her eyes stinging. This was the humiliation he had wanted. "Here," he said. Elena looked up. Sebastian was reaching into the pocket of his trousers. He pulled out a thick folded wad of cash, his walking around money. He peeled off a single crisp $100 bill. He held it out to her, waggling it between two fingers. Ms. Vane, the ICE receptionist, was watching now. She was pretending to type, but her eyes were fixed on the scene. "For the ride," Sebastian said, his voice dripping with mock charity. "Call it a parting gift. Go on, take it. You've earned something." This was it. This was the bottom. To be treated like a charity case, a panhandler, by the man she had spent 12 years building, 12 years supporting. The man whose entire public persona, the cultured real estate mogul, she had built from scratch. She had taught him which fork to use. She had taught him the difference between a Monet and a Manet. She had written the witty speeches he gave at benefits, the ones that got him on the boards of museums. And here he was, offering her cab fare. "I'm not waiting for a taxi, Sebastian," she said, her voice low and tight. He blinked, his smile faltering for just a second. "Oh," he laughed, recovering. "Right. Who's picking you up? That book club friend of yours? What's her name? Janet? in her 20-year-old Subaru. That should be a fun ride back to wherever it is you're going. Someone is picking me up, she repeated, her voice flat. She turned her back to him, facing the rain-lashed glass. Ooh, a mystery, Sebastian mocked. He leaned against a nearby marble pillar, crossing his arms. He was settling in. This is just too good. The great escape of Elena Petrova. He pulled out his own phone, a brand new $2,000 model, and started texting. He was probably texting his new girlfriend, a 24-year-old fitness model named Candy. You won't believe this. The ex is standing in the lobby like a drowned rat. Hilarious. Elena closed her eyes. She focused on her breathing. In, out. She thought of what he'd said. Your blog. 12 followers. It's pathetic. He didn't know. He couldn't in his wildest dreams comprehend it. Aurelius's attic was pathetic. It was meant to be. It was the perfect boring academic cover for her real work. The work she did on a completely different encrypted invitation-only forum. The work she did as E. Petrova, the anonymous online analyst who had for the last 3 years been the most respected and feared authenticator in the private art world. She thought of Aurelius, the anonymous user who had first contacted her. He'd posted a high-resolution image of a supposed 15th-century Dutch painting asking for opinions. The experts at Sotheby's and the Getty had declared it a fake. Elena, from her kitchen counter in New York, had spent 72 hours analyzing the digital images. She'd looked at the chemical composition of the pigments, the craquelure of the varnish, the underdrawing. She had sent Aurelius a simple private message. It's not a fake. It's a pastiche. The sky was painted over in the 17th century, but the figures, the hands, that's the lost work of Jan van Eyck's top apprentice. The signature isn't on the canvas. It's in the way he mixed lead tin yellow with his varnish. Look closer. 2 days later, she received a reply. They looked. You were right. You just saved me $40 million. Who are you? That was 3 years ago. Her forum friend Aurelius had become her lifeline. A mind that matched hers. A man who, unlike her husband, listened. He sent her queries from museums, from private collectors. Is this Romanov jewel real? Is this supposed Rembrandt a studio work? And she would tell him. Her useless information, her 16th century dirt, was her secret. It was the only thing that had kept her sane. A minute passed. Then 2. The rain lashed. Sebastian was still there, a smug gargoyle against the marble. 5 minutes. Elena's stomach clenched. He said he would be here. He promised. Sebastian chuckled, pushing off the pillar. Well, this has been fun, Elle, but I'm getting bored. Looks like your mystery ride is a no-show. Shocking. Go on, take the 100. Get yourself out of the rain. He tossed the bill onto the floor at her feet. It landed on the wet, muddy patch where people had shaken their umbrellas. Call me? He said with a final, pitying glance. When you're desperate, you will be. He started to walk toward the revolving door, and just as his hand touched the glass, a new sound cut through the lobby's silence. It was not the sound of a taxi horn or a bus. It was the sound of a very large, very expensive engine idling at a frequency so low you felt it in your bones before you heard it. Sebastian stopped. He turned. Ms. Vane, the receptionist who had seen presidents and oligarchs pass through these doors, actually stood up. It glided to the curb with the silent, predatory grace of a panther. It wasn't a car, it was a statement. A Rolls-Royce Phantom long wheelbase in a shade of midnight blue so deep it looked black in the rain. It wasn't just new, it was custom. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't just suggest wealth, it suggested power, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Sebastian stopped, his hand still on the revolving door. His mouth fell open slightly. Damn, he muttered, impressed. Must be Mr. Hicks. I heard he was getting a new one. He was talking to himself, to Elena, to anyone. He was impressed and a little jealous. It was a better car than his own Maybach. The car sat at the curb, its engine a quiet rumble. The rain seemed to be afraid of it, the water beating and fleeing from the flawless ceramic-coated paint. The spirit of ecstasy ornament on the hood seemed to glow with its own internal light. Then the driver's door opened. A man in a perfectly tailored black uniform and chauffeur's cap stepped out. He was tall, built like a former Special Forces operator, and moved with an efficiency that was almost military. He opened a large black reinforced umbrella, the kind that could probably stop a bullet, and walked not to the main revolving doors but directly to the side door where Elena was standing. Sebastian, who was still frozen mid-exit, physically pushed himself upright. His confusion was rapidly turning to shock. He wasn't going for Mr. Hicks. The driver, Arthur, stopped a perfect 3 feet from Elena. He was on the outside of the glass. She was on the inside. He didn't speak. He just looked at her and gave a small, respectful nod. Elena nodded back. The knot of fear in her stomach dissolved, replaced by a profound, steadying calm. She pushed the glass door open. Arthur immediately angled the umbrella to cover her, shielding her from the downpour. He said nothing. Sebastian's jaw was now officially slack. He watched as Elena, his useless, penniless ex-wife, was sheltered by a private driver from a $700,000 car. "What the hell?" Sebastian whispered. But it was what happened next that shattered his reality. The driver didn't open the door for her. Instead, he turned and opened the rear door, as if he had been waiting for a cue. And a man stepped out. He emerged from the car, not in a hurry, but with a deliberate, unassailable calm. He emerged into the pouring rain as if the weather would not dare to inconvenience him. He was tall, with dark hair cut short and neat. He wore no tie, just a dark gray cashmere turtleneck under a bespoke Loro Piana overcoat that probably cost more than Elena's entire settlement. His face was sharp, intelligent, and held an expression of such profound, focused intensity that Sebastian felt a jolt of actual physical fear. He was a man who didn't just walk into rooms. He claimed them. Sebastian knew this face. His blood ran cold. He felt a prickle of sweat on his neck despite the lobby's chill. He knew this face from the most exclusive high-stakes issues of Forbes and The Economist. He knew it from hushed whispers at billion-dollar conferences. It was Damian Valerius. The Damian Valerius. The reclusive, almost mythical founder of Valerius Logistics, the man who had revolutionized global shipping and data transfer. A man who bought and sold companies the way Sebastian bought golf clubs. A man whose personal net worth was rumored to be in the 12-figure range. A man Sebastian's own firm, Shaw Real Estate, had been trying to get a meeting with just a 15-minute pitch for 18 months to fund their new flagship development, the Shaw Tower. They had been rejected, stonewalled, and ignored at every turn. What is happening? Sebastian's mind was a screaming void. Is he here for Hicks? Did he just see Elena? Is this a mistake? Damian Valerius ignored the rain. He ignored the driver. He ignored the entire city of New York. His gaze, an intense, piercing blue, was locked on one person and one person only. Elena. He walked toward her. The driver, Arthur, stayed by the car. Sebastian, his mind racing and failing, stumbled forward. He was a networker, a shark. This was an opportunity. He didn't know what it was, but his instincts addled as they were screamed at him to do something. "Mr. Valerius," he called out, pushing through the door into the rain, his Zegna suit immediately darkening. He jogged the few steps, a desperate, fawning smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Valerius, Sebastian Shaw from Shaw Real Estate. I've been sending my prospectus to your office for—" Damian Valerius didn't even turn his head. He didn't slow down. He walked right past Sebastian as if he were a piece of street furniture, a lamppost, a fire hydrant. He stopped in front of Elena. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. It was a smile of such genuine warmth and respect that it transformed his severe face. "Elena," he said. His voice was a smooth, cultured baritone. "I trust everything is concluded." Elena let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 12 years. The tension drained from her shoulders. The shame, the humiliation, the coldness of the lobby, it all evaporated. "Yes, Damien," she said, her own voice steady and clear. "It's done." "Good," he said. He gestured to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. "Then let's get you out of this rain. Your new life is waiting." My life." This was Sebastian stammering, his brain catching fire. He was rain-soaked now, his expensive hair plastered to his forehead. He looked pathetic. He was standing in a puddle, his $200 Italian leather shoes ruined. "Elena, you know Mr. Valerius." This time Elena turned to look at him. She looked at this man who had called her useless, who had thrown a $100 bill at her feet. There was no anger in her eyes, no hatred. There was only pity, a cool, distant pity. "You never listened to me, Sebastian," she said, her voice quiet but carrying over the rain. "You never once asked about my work. You just laughed." "Your work," he spluttered. "Your blog, how does..." It was then that Damien Valerius finally acknowledged Sebastian's existence. He turned his head slowly, his blue eyes narrowing. His gaze was not a gaze. It was a physical force. It was the look a biologist gives a specimen under a microscope just before dissecting it. He looked Sebastian Shaw up and down from his soaked suit to his terrified, confused eyes. "Mr. Shaw," Damien said, his voice dropping 10 degrees. Sebastian brightened, desperate. Yes, Mr. Valerius. We should talk. You are the man who called my chief curator's research 16th century dirt." Sebastian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He just goggled. "Chief? Curator. You are the man," Damien continued, his voice lethally soft, "who dismissed the most brilliant mind in pigment analysis and art forensics I have ever encountered as a housewife." He took a step closer. Sebastian, a man who intimidated everyone, took an involuntary step back. "And you are the man who..." Damien's eyes flicked to the damp $100 bill lying on the pavement near the door. "Just tried to give a parting gift to a woman who as of 900 a.m. this morning has a research and acquisition budget of $200 million. Sebastian was white. He was shaking. 200 million. "Elena," Damien said, turning his back on Sebastian, completely a final, brutal dismissal. "We'll be late for the flight." He gently, respectfully placed a hand on the small of her back and guided her to the car. Arthur, the driver, held the door. Elena paused just for a second. She looked back at the shell of a man on the sidewalk, a man drowning in a puddle of his own arrogance. She said nothing. She got into the car. Damien followed, settling in beside her. Arthur closed the door. It made a sound like a bank vault sealing a heavy, satisfying thunk. Inside there was only silence. The car pulled away from the curb, its movement so smooth it felt like floating. It merged into the Park Avenue traffic and in seconds was gone. Sebastian Shaw was left alone on the sidewalk in the pouring rain in front of the iceberg receptionist, Ms. Vane, who had seen it all. He was still holding his useless phone. He looked down at the $100 bill on the wet marble. He had never in his entire life felt so small. The inside of the Rolls-Royce was not an interior. It was a sanctuary. The rain that hammered the city just inches away was completely inaudible. There was only the faint scent of old leather and new technology and the soft, warm glow of the internal lights. Elena leaned her head back against the plush leather and closed her eyes. "Are you all right, Elena?" Damien asked. His voice was gentle now, all the ice reserved for the man on the sidewalk. "I am," she breathed, opening her eyes. "I'm free." "I am sorry for your ordeal," he said. "He is a spectacularly small man." "You have no idea," Elena murmured. She looked at him, the man she had known for 3 years, but had only met in person twice. "Are you sure you want me for this, Damien, after seeing that? What I came from?" Damien turned in his seat to face her. "Elena," he said, his expression serious. "Let me be precise. 3 years ago, I acquired a 15th century Dutch painting at a private auction. My own experts, the best at the Getty and the Rijksmuseum, were convinced it was a fake from a later period. The provenance was a mess. They told me I had wasted $40 million. He paused, a flicker of a smile. Then I found an anonymous online forum for art historians, and I found a user named E. Petrova. She was in a heated debate with a professor from Oxford about the use of azurite in early Renaissance work. I remember that. Elena smiled. Professor Miles. He was insufferable and wrong. So I took a risk, Damien continued. I created an account, Aurelius. I posted high-resolution images of my fake painting. And I asked one question, what do you see? And I told you, Elena said, her voice gaining strength, that it wasn't a fake. It was a pastiche. The sky was painted in the 17th century, but the figures, the hands, the underdrawing, that was 15th century. Someone had updated it to match the style of the time. But the original artist's fingerprint was right there in the way he mixed lead tin yellow with his varnish. You saw in 2 days what an entire team of experts couldn't see in 6 months, Damien said. You, Elena Petrova, saved my Vermeer. That painting is now the pride of my collection. And you are the only person I trust to manage it. The only one. He gestured out the window. The car was now on the FDR drive, speeding toward the highway. Your ordeal, as you call it, is over. Sebastian Shaw was a temporary inconvenience. Your work is permanent. The Valerius Foundation's entire collection is now yours to command. The jet is waiting at Teterboro. We will be in Geneva by morning. Your new apartment is ready. The restoration lab, the one you designed via email, is fully stocked. The X-ray fluorescence spectrometer you wanted just arrived from Germany. Elena looked at her hands. The hands Sebastian had mocked for not being manicured. The hands that in college had been stained with pigment and linseed oil. They were steady now. He called my work dirt, she whispered. We are all dirt. Elena, Damien said, looking out at the East River. The only difference is what we choose to build with it. He built a house of cards. You are building a cathedral. For the first time in more than a decade, Elena Petrova truly completely smiled. Sebastian Shaw did not go to winged foot. He went back to his empty penthouse apartment, the one Elena had been ordered to vacate a month prior, and drank. He drank an entire bottle of 25-year-old Macallan, but the alcohol couldn't burn away the image of Damien Valerius's eyes. Chief curator, $200 million. The words echoed in his head, nonsensical. It was a joke. It had to be a prank. Elena, his Elena, the quiet, mousy woman who reorganized his bookshelves. On Monday he went to the office hungover and furious. He barked at his assistant. Get me a meeting with Damien Valerius, now. Tell them I'm a personal friend of Elena Petrova. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, looked confused. Elena Petrova, sir, isn't that... Just do it, he roared. An hour later, Chloe buzzed him. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Valerius's office. They said they have no idea who you are. And they added a message. What? What message? They said, Ms. Petrova is no longer associated with you in any way, and any further attempts at contact will be forwarded to our legal department. Sebastian slammed the phone down. Legal department. His ex-wife was sicking Valerius's legal department on him. That was just the beginning. 2 days later, the call came. It was from his contact at J.P. Morgan Chase, the primary lender for his new flagship skyscraper, the Shaw Tower. Sebastian, the banker, a man named Mark, said, his voice tense. We have a problem. A big one. What problem? Your financing. The private equity firm that was backing the main loan, Apex Holdings, they've been acquired. Sebastian felt a cold dread. Acquired by who? Who would be big enough to buy Apex overnight? Valerius Logistics. Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. Sebastian, they're not just acquiring. They're liquidating. They called our loan. All of it. They want the full $400 million by the end of the quarter. Or they take the asset. They can't, Sebastian screamed. The building's not even halfway done. That's insane. It's unethical. It's not, Sebastian. It's in the fine print. And Valerius, he owns the fine print. He's not just a buyer. He's a predator. Someone painted a target on your back. You'd better find new financing fast. But the word was out. Sebastian Shaw was toxic. He scrambled. He called every contact he had. But the name Valerius was a brick wall. No one would touch him. The lines of credit he had lived on for a decade vanished. His partners, smelling blood in the water, began to sue, desperate to get their money out before the entire ship sank. He was in his office 3 weeks after the divorce when the full horrifying realization hit him. He was staring at a photo from a company party 5 years ago. He was there, arm around a politician, glass of champagne in hand, and in the background by the food was Elena. She was on her laptop, always on that damned laptop. He remembered that night. He had been boasting loudly about how he'd creatively leveraged the Apex Holdings deal, how he'd hidden the risk in a series of offshore accounts. He thought she was just checking email. He told me I was a specialist in useless information. He said I paid too much attention to boring details. His blood turned to ice. He staggered to his desk and opened his own financial records. The account numbers, the timelines, the shell corporations. She hadn't just been listening. She had been documenting. He thought of Aurelius, her forum friend, the man she had been talking to with religious devotion for years. It was him. It was Valerius. She was talking to him the whole time. She hadn't just known him. She hadn't just met him. She had been feeding him the information. She had handed Damian Valerius the knife, and he had gleefully used it to sever Sebastian's financial arteries. The divorce settlement, the paltry $50,000. It wasn't an insult. It was a distraction. She didn't want his money. She wanted to watch him burn. Sebastian Shaw, the man who prided himself on seeing every angle, had been played. He hadn't been divorced by a mousy housewife. He had been surgically dismantled by a master strategist. 6 months later, Sebastian Shaw was a ghost. A whisper. The name on the half-finished, rust-stained skeleton of the Shaw Tower had been covered by a massive banner that simply read, "Future site of the Valerius Data Center." His company was in receivership. His penthouse sold at a humiliating loss to pay off creditors. His Maybach repossessed. His 24-year-old girlfriend Candy had vanished the moment his Amex was declined. He was living in a short-term rental in Murray Hill, a place he would have once contemptuously flown over in his helicopter. He'd sold his Rolex and his Patek Philippe. He'd sold his Zegna suits to a consignment shop. He was at Ashby's auction house that night, not as a bidder, but on a guest pass from a junior associate who owed him an old, forgotten favor. He was there to network, to beg to be seen, to prove he wasn't dead. He was there to find anyone who would still take his call. The room was electric. The centerpiece of the auction was a recently rediscovered masterpiece, The Calling of St. Peter, attributed to a minor follower of Caravaggio, but rumored by the art world's most elite gossips to be by the master himself. Sebastian stood in the back by the champagne bar, nursing a single free glass. He looked haggard. His suit was off the rack. He was invisible, and he knew it. The bidding was frantic, a blur of paddles from collectors in the room and flashing lights from the phone banks representing anonymous global billionaires. "50 million, cried the auctioneer, a man named Simon. 55 from the front row. 65 from the phone. 70-75. The bids climbed, each one a hammer blow. $90 million from the bidder in London. Do I hear 95? A hush. 95, Gary, came a call from another phone bank. 95 million going once. Going twice. 100 million. The voice didn't come from a phone. It came from a new bidder who had just signaled. The entire room turned. It was a representative from the Getty. The bidding war was now a blood sport. The London phone bank countered. 105 million. Sold, the auctioneer cried, slamming his gavel after a tense, breathless pause. Sold for $105 million to the anonymous bidder on phone line 4. A wave of applause. Sebastian just felt numb. It was money he couldn't even comprehend anymore. And now, the auctioneer said, his face flushed with excitement, to speak about the painting's future and its exciting new home, we have a representative from the buyer, the Valerius Foundation. Sebastian's heart stopped. A woman walked from the wings onto the stage. It was Elena. But it was not the Elena he knew. This woman was a different being. She wore a simple, impossibly elegant dark blue suit by Acris. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional bun that highlighted her intelligent eyes. She wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. She radiated an authority so profound the entire room went silent. She walked to the podium, and her voice, clear and confident, filled the hall. Thank you. On behalf of the Valerius Foundation, I am thrilled to announce that the Calling of St. Peter, which our research has now definitively confirmed, is an early lost Caravaggio, will be the new centerpiece of our public wing in Geneva. The room erupted. This was news. This was history. She hadn't just bought it. She had confirmed it. She was the story. Following a 6-month restoration, she continued, which I will personally oversee, the painting will be unveiled to the public free of charge for all to study and enjoy. The applause was deafening. Curators from the Met, the Louvre, and the Getty were on their feet. They flocked to the stage as she stepped down, all desperate for a moment with her. Ms. Petrova, the new kingmaker of the art world. Sebastian was in the back by the bar, invisible. She and her security detail, including Arthur the driver, began to walk toward the exit. She was going to pass right by him. She has to see me, he thought, a desperate, pathetic hope. She has to see what she's done. Her group approached. He tensed. Elena was in a deep conversation with the director of the National Gallery, her face animated as they discussed X-ray tomography. She was 5 feet from him. She passed him. She didn't stop. She didn't slow down. She didn't look. Her eyes never flickered. It wasn't that she looked at him and dismissed him. That would have been something. That would have been a connection. No. She didn't see him at all. He was to her nothing. A piece of the wall. A shadow in a room full of light. Elena Petrova walked out of Ashby's, her heels clicking decisively on the marble floor, leaving Sebastian Shaw alone in the ruins of the life he thought he owned. A year later, Geneva, Switzerland. The Valerius Foundation's restoration lab, perched on the top floor of a glass and steel building overlooking the lake, was not a room. It was Elena Petrova's mind made manifest. The air was not air. It was a carefully curated atmosphere, humidified to a precise 45%, filtered of all pollutants and kept at a constant 70 degrees. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence, the gentle thrumming hum of the high-powered ventilation, the quiet click and whir of the X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, the whisper of the climate control systems. Elena, dressed in a white lab coat, was bent over a large 16th-century panel painting. To the untrained eye, it was a competent, if uninspired portrait titled, "The Duchess of Orleans at Prayer." It showed a pale, pious woman, eyes cast demurely downward. It was, in a word, boring. But Elena wasn't looking at the surface. Beside her, a high-resolution 8K monitor displayed what her XRF spectrometer was seeing, and what it saw was a ghost. Beneath the dull browns of the Duchess's dress, beneath the pious flesh of her face, another painting was screaming to be seen. A secret, defiant act of creation by a woman artist, Marina, whose name Elena had found on a single dismissive shipping manifest from 1588. Her work had been deemed too bold, and had been unceremoniously painted over by a male apprentice. Elena was not just restoring a painting, she was performing a resurrection. The pneumatic door to the lab hissed open. Damian Valerius walked in. He held 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on the sterile steel counter a safe distance from the workspace. "How is she today, Elena?" "She's angry," Elena murmured, not turning away from the monitor. He used a cheap, unstable azurite to cover her sky. "The fool! He was in such a hurry to erase her, his work is cracking. Hers is as stable as the day she painted it." "A common theme," Damian said, taking a sip of his own coffee. "Insecure men in a hurry." He sat on a stool watching her. Theirs was not a romance. It was an alliance of 2 minds that operated on the same frequency. After a long moment, Damian set his cup down. "I received the final report from the SEC on the Shaw case this morning. It's officially closed." Elena's hand, which was adjusting the spectrometer's focus, did not tremble. But it did for a second pause. "He's been barred," Damian continued, reading from his tablet. "For life. Barred from trading. Barred from sitting on any board. The final seizure of assets is complete. They took everything." Elena finally turned. Her eyes were clear. There was only finality. "Good." Damian watched her. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you. I was speaking with the lead investigator. He told me the anonymous submission that started it all. He called it the Rosetta Stone of white-collar crime." Elena took a sip of coffee. She said nothing. "He told me," Damian went on, "that it was the most perfect self-contained data set he had ever seen. Not just accusations, proof, timelines, offshore account numbers, coded transaction logs from his private ledger, details so boring, that no one but an accountant would ever have looked at them, and even then they'd need a key." He looked directly at her. "The file that broke the case. It was an encrypted spreadsheet. It perfectly cross-referenced every single illegal transfer with Sebastian's public calendar, his private travel receipts, and even his restaurant reservations." Elena's mind flashed back. A Tuesday night 4 years ago. Sebastian drunk on scotch at his massive, ostentatious desk. He'd been laughing on the phone. The beauty of it is that it's all just boring details. No one looks at the details. He'd hung up, seen her, and scoffed. He'd tossed a stack of printed ledgers at her. "Here, make yourself useful. File these. It's just numbers. Simple enough even for you." He had turned back to his computer. And she had knelt. She had gathered the papers. And she had looked. She who could spot a forgery from 500 years ago saw the sloppy, fraudulent pattern instantly. That night she bought an encrypted USB drive and hid it in a hollowed-out book. And for 3 years, every time he mocked her, she had added a line to her spreadsheet. She called the file the Shaw Pastiche. Now, in the clean, bright light of her new life, she looked at Damian. "He was right," she said quietly. "He told me over and over that I was just a specialist in useless information." "He presented you with a forgery," Damian said. "A forgery of a life, a forgery of a business. And you did what you always do. You looked for the original." "A very, very ugly original," Elena murmured. "He was sloppy. Men like Sebastian always are. They're all surface." She set her coffee cup down and slipped her goggles back on. It was time to get back to work. "The investigator had one last question," Damian said. "He wanted to know who you were. I told him, a concerned citizen." Elena smiled a real full smile. "That works." She turned back to the XRF monitor. The image of the hidden woman, Marina, stared back at her. A woman who had been silenced, buried under a layer of acceptable, boring mediocrity. "You'll have her out by spring," Damian said. "Oh, much sooner," Elena replied. She picked up a fine-tipped tool, her hand as steady as a surgeon's. The varnish he used to cover her. "It's unstable. It's practically begging to be removed." She looked at the screen, at the ghost of Marina, and felt a profound connection across 5 centuries. "He was right about one thing, Damien," she said, her voice a soft, satisfied whisper. "What's that?" "I do pay very, very close attention to the boring details." She touched the tool to the canvas, and with the first definitive move began the delicate work of bringing the truth to light. And that right there is the difference between price and value. Sebastian Shaw knew the price of everything: his suits, his cars, his wives. But Elena knew the value of everything: of knowledge, of patience, and most importantly, of herself. The greatest revenge isn't getting loud, it's getting powerful. It's not about being saved by a billionaire. It's about being the person even a billionaire turns to for expertise. Her victory wasn't the car. It was the fact that she had earned the right to be in it. What did you think of Elena's story? Do you believe the greatest comebacks are the quietest ones? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own value, and subscribe for more stories of justice and unexpected twists. We read every comment. Thanks for listening.
A crowded room, the clinking of champagne glasses, and a whisper that cuts deeper than a knife. What happens when a woman, 7 months pregnant and visibly exhausted, is cornered at the most important gala of the year? She's confronted by a high-flying executive who sees her as nothing more than a pretty, passive accessory. The executive smiles, her voice laced with venom, and calls the pregnant wife useless. But she just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because the 2 men standing behind her, the billionaire's personal guards, don't just protect his body, they protect his queen, and the order to remove her is given before the echo of the insult even fades. The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Great Hall dripped light like liquid diamonds, scattering rainbows across the marble floors. For Alice Thorne, 7 months pregnant and wearing a custom-made silk gown that felt more like beautiful armor than a dress, the light felt interrogative. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and expensive French perfume, was becoming difficult to breathe. This was the annual Thorne Foundation Innovators Gala, the undisputed pinnacle of New York City's philanthropic calendar, and she was, ostensibly, the hostess. Her husband, Julian Thorne, stood 20 feet away, a human vortex. He was a tall man, with dark hair silvering at the temples and a restless energy that seemed to charge the air around him. He wasn't just wealthy, he was gravitational. Senators angled for a word, tech rivals offered respectful nods, and models laughed a little too loudly at his quiet observations. He was the CEO, the founder, the name on the building, Julian Thorne, the monolith of modern industry. And Alice, in the eyes of the room, was his beautiful, recent, and very pregnant acquisition. She rested a hand on the tight swell of her stomach, feeling the familiar kick of her daughter. It was a secret language, a small rebellion in this room of coded pleasantries. She saw the glances. He finally settled down. She's lovely, of course, but what does she do? Smart girl, locking that down before the baby arrived. They didn't know her. They saw Alice Thorne, the wife, not Dr. Alice Walker, the mind. Before Julian, she had been a name whispered in Silicon Valley, the anonymous architect behind Aura, a predictive analysis engine so sophisticated it bordered on precognition. Julian hadn't just bought her company. He had, in a move that shocked the financial world, pursued her. Theirs had been a merger of intellect first, a fiery clash of wills in a glass-walled boardroom that had, impossibly, softened into love. Now, her work was this, smiling, nodding, and pretending her feet weren't swelling. Julian had insisted she step back, just for the final trimester. "The company will survive, Alice," he'd murmured, kissing her temple. But you two are my whole world. Rest." Rest, however, felt like erasure. She watched a woman with a sleek, predatory grace detach herself from a group by the main staircase. This was Victoria Vance. New, brilliant, and utterly ruthless, Victoria was Julian's latest star hire, the new vice president of global acquisitions. She had been poached from a rival firm, and her reputation preceded her. Victoria didn't just close deals, she eviscerated the opposition. Alice watched as Victoria approached Julian, her smile painted on, her eyes fixed on him with a laser focus. She touched his arm, a brief, proprietary gesture, and leaned in to say something. Julian's expression didn't change, but he took half a step back, a subtle recalibration that only Alice would notice. He angled his body, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. He gave a small nod, a silent question. "Are you okay?" Alice smiled back, a genuine, tired smile. "I'm fine." Victoria followed his gaze, and her eyes landed on Alice. The practiced, brilliant smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It was replaced by an expression Alice knew well, assessment, followed by dismissal. Victoria Vance looked at the pregnant woman across the room and saw a non-entity, a soft, biological distraction from the real business of power. Victoria turned back to Julian, her mission re-engaged. Alice sighed, turning her attention to the exhibit. This year's gala was funding the Aura Project, her baby before the baby. It was an initiative to fund STEM education for underprivileged girls. Julian had named it after her old company. "Your eye is better than mine, you know." Julian's voice was suddenly at her ear, his hand landing on the small of her back. The warmth of it seeped through the silk. She leaned into him. "You're just saying that because you approved the font choice, and it's terrible." He chuckled, a low sound that vibrated against her. "The board approved it. I merely abstained." "Coward," she whispered, and he laughed again. "Mrs. Thorne?" A new voice, crisp and sharp. They both turned. Victoria Vance stood before them, her red dress a stark slash of colour. Her eyes were fixed on Julian, but she addressed Alice. "Such a wonderful party," Victoria said, her gaze sweeping over Alice's pronounced stomach. "You must be simply exhausted. It's so much standing around. You're very brave to host in your condition." The subtext was neon. "You're a decoration, and a tired-looking one at that." "Alice is the strongest person I know," Julian said, his tone casual, but his grip on Alice's back tightened possessively. "Ms. Vance, I assume the quarterly reports were to your liking." "Perfection, Mr. Thorne," Victoria said, her focus shifting to him entirely, as if Alice had vanished. "The green tech merger is at a critical phase. I've identified 3 redundancies in their leadership that will save us 9 figures in the first year." "Good," Julian said, "but I want your team to interface with the Aura Project Board before you finalize the absorption. Their tech is the backbone of the acquisition." Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course. Though honestly, Julian, I think my team can handle the absorption without bothering the charity wing. It's a simple asset transfer. We don't need to get bogged down in their sentimental projects." Alice stiffened. "The Aura Project is not a charity wing, Miss Vance," she said, her voice quiet but cold. "It's our primary R&D incubator. Its sentimental projects are the patents that make the green tech acquisition viable in the first place." Victoria Vance, finally, truly, looked at Alice. Her eyes narrowed. It was the look of a predator realizing another animal had just wandered into its territory. She had assumed Alice was Julian's pet. The idea that she was a competitor, or worse, an authority, was clearly an insult. I'm sure you feel very connected to it, dear, Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. But the real work, the multi-billion-dollar deals, they're dreadfully complex. I'm sure Julian doesn't want to bore you with the details. Before Julian could speak, Alice cut him off with a small gesture. On the contrary, Alice said, stepping slightly forward, I find the details fascinating. For instance, your plan to save 9 figures. If you cut the 3 executives you're targeting, you'll also lose the entire engineering team loyal to them, which holds the IP for the new battery cell. Your savings will cost us the entire future of the division. Victoria's face went white, then mottled with a dull, angry red. She had been publicly, cleanly, and expertly corrected, and not by Julian Thorne, but by the pregnant wife she had dismissed as furniture. Julian Thorne, for his part, was watching the exchange with a look of immense, terrifying pride. I have the situation under control, Victoria stammered. I'm sure you believe you do, Alice replied, her voice soft. She turned to Julian. Darling, I think I do need that rest. Would you mind if I sat in the private study for a moment? Of course, Julian said, kissing her forehead. He glanced at Victoria. Miss Vance, a word of advice. Do your homework, all of it. He began to walk Alice away, but Victoria, consumed by a sudden, blinding humiliation, took a step after them. Mr. Thorne, she called out, her voice hard. Julian paused but didn't turn. It's just, I see what's happening, Victoria said, her voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of those nearby. She's afraid of strong women who actually work for a living. She's threatened. Julian turned, his face a mask of cold fury. You are out of line, Miss Vance. Am I? Victoria laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Or am I just the only one willing to say it? You're a shark, Julian. We all know it. And you've tied yourself to her. She can't keep up. She can't contribute. She's just a weight. Alice stopped. She turned back to face Victoria. The small circle of silence around them widened. The music seemed to fade. You should stop talking, Alice said, her voice devoid of emotion. Why? Victoria sneered, taking a step closer. She was vibrating with anger, her career flashing before her eyes, and she chose to blame the woman in front of her. Because it's the truth. Look at you. You're a walking liability. You're not a partner. You're a dependent. In the real world, in the boardroom, you are utterly, completely useless. The word hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from the magnificent hall. Alice didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just watched Victoria, her expression unreadable. Victoria, realizing she had gone too far, tried to backtrack, but her pride wouldn't let her. I just mean, from a business perspective. She never finished the sentence. Julian Thorne hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved. He had simply lifted one finger. From the periphery, 2 large men materialized. They were not in museum security uniforms. They wore impeccably tailored black suits, earpieces, and the blank, absolute lack of expression that signaled they were not paid to have opinions. They were Mr. Harris and Mr. Cole, the head of Julian's personal detail. They had been standing 10 feet away, blending in. Now, they were on either side of Victoria Vance. Mr. Thorne? Mr. Harris asked, his voice a low rumble. Julian's eyes never left Victoria's. Miss Vance's invitation is revoked. She is trespassing. Victoria's blood ran cold. What? Julian, no, you can't. I was just... Mr. Harris. Mr. Cole. Julian's voice was flat, like a blade. Throw her out. The encounter didn't happen by chance. Victoria Vance had been planning it, in a way, all evening. From the moment she arrived, swathed in crimson designer silk. She had been a creature of pure, distilled ambition. She navigated the gala not as a celebration, but as a battlefield. She collected contacts, assessed power dynamics, and filed away weaknesses for later use. And the greatest, most glaring weakness she had identified was Alice Thorne. Victoria had spent her entire life fighting to be taken seriously. She'd graduated top of her class at Wharton, clawed her way up through the misogynistic jungles of investment banking, and had sacrificed everything: relationships, sleep, the very idea of a personal life, to get where she was. She was her job. Her value was quantified in the 9-figure deals she closed. Then there was Alice. When Julian Thorne, the most ruthless and respected CEO in the nation, had married a quiet academic-turned-startup founder, the business world had been baffled. When he'd bought her company, Aura, for an astronomical sum, they'd chalked it up to a bizarre passion project. And when Alice had all but disappeared from public life, surfacing only as a silent, smiling appendage at his side, they had concluded the truth was simple. She was a trophy. A very smart, very lucky trophy. But a trophy nonetheless. Victoria had bought into this narrative completely. It was easier than accepting the alternative, that Alice Thorne had something she didn't. So, earlier in the evening, when Alice had excused herself from a tedious conversation with a senator, Victoria had seen her chance. Alice hadn't gone to the powder room. Instead, she had slipped into a quieter, darker adjoining gallery, an exhibit on Grecian artifacts. She was standing in front of a statue of Athena, her hand on her stomach, her profile outlined by the soft spotlights. Victoria had followed her, her heels clicking softly on the marble. "You must be exhausted," she'd begun, her voice pitched in perfect false sympathy. Alice turned, unsurprised. "Ms. Vance, I'm just fine, thank you. It's a bit overwhelming, all the noise." "I can only imagine," Victoria said, moving to stand beside her, though she didn't look at the statue. She was looking at Alice's reflection in the protective glass. "It's so much. Standing. Waiting." Alice turned to her, a small, polite smile fixed on her face. "I suppose it is." "Julian is a force, isn't he?" Victoria continued, pivoting the conversation. "I've never worked for anyone so demanding, so precise. It's thrilling." She then launched her first probe. "I'm handling the new green tech merger, as you know. It's an incredibly complex $500 million acquisition. I'm sure he doesn't bore you with the details." It was a test, a simple question designed to confirm Alice's status. A wife would say, "Oh, he leaves that at the office." "He doesn't bore me, no," Alice replied, her gaze still on Athena. "The valuation on their new carbon capture patent alone is worth the sticker price." Victoria's eyes narrowed. A flicker of surprise. That was a specific, accurate data point. "You follow the market?" "I follow our assets," Alice said simply. She then turned, giving Victoria her full attention. "Why did you follow me in here, Ms. Vance?" The directness was disarming. Victoria decided to pivot. "I'm worried about him," she said, leaning in, adopting a conspiratorial tone. "He's under an immense amount of pressure. This merger, the new product launch, and now with you so close to your term. It's a lot. He needs people around him who can help, people who can carry the load." Alice understood immediately. This wasn't concern. This was a positioning statement. Victoria was painting herself as the indispensable right hand, and Alice as the fragile burden. "Julian is more than capable of handling his responsibilities," Alice said, her tone firming. "And he has an excellent team, including you, I'm sure." Victoria laughed, a small, airy sound. "Oh, I am. I live for this." While you've been resting, I've spent the last 6 months restructuring our European debt. I added 1.2 billion to our operating budget. That's what I do. I add value. She let the words hang. The unspoken contrast was obvious. I add billions. You add a baby. That's very impressive, Alice said, her voice betraying no offense. I'm sure the shareholders are thrilled with your performance. Victoria's frustration grew. Alice was a wall of polite, calm dismissal. She wasn't taking the bait. She wasn't getting angry or defensive or weepy. She was just still. It was time to be more direct. Look, Alice. May I call you Alice? She said, dropping the pretense of politeness. I know what you are. I've seen it a dozen times. A smart woman gets the ring, she gets the house, and she punches out. She stops contributing. And the man, he's left to do all the heavy lifting. My contribution, as you call it, is not your concern, Miss Vance, Alice said. The steel was entering her voice now. Oh, but it is, Victoria snapped, because his distraction affects the company, and the company is my concern. Some people build empires, and some are just there to carry the air. This was the line, the deliberate, calculated insult. Alice, however, simply stared at her. It was this stare, a calm, analytical, and utterly unimpressed gaze, that finally broke Victoria's composure. This pregnant, placid woman was looking at her as if she were the one who was irrelevant. It was this silent, infuriating confidence that followed them back into the main hall. It was this that festered under Victoria's skin as she watched Alice and Julian interact with the ease of true partners. And it was this that exploded out of her when Alice corrected her with devastating precision on the Green Tech merger. The humiliation was total. Victoria Vance, the sharpest mind in the room, had been dressed down by the trophy wife in front of her boss. Her brain went into fight or flight. She saw her future at Thorn Industries, the one she had sacrificed everything for, evaporating. She saw the smirks of her colleagues, the disappointment in Julian's eyes. It was all Alice's fault. And so, when she'd shouted, "Useless," it wasn't just an insult. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to define Alice in a way that made sense to her, to put her back in the wife box where she belonged. But as Mr. Harris and Mr. Cole, two men built of solid granite, closed in on her, Victoria Vance realized she hadn't just misread the room. She had misread the entire universe. The word useless dropped into the opulent air of the great hall like a shard of ice. The string quartet, moments before playing a lively Vivaldi piece, seemed to falter, the first violinist's bow skittering on a string. The nearest conversations, which had been a polite, dense hum, died in an instant, creating a vacuum of shocked silence. Victoria Vance stood, defiant, her chest heaving. She had said the unsayable. She had broken the primary rule of high-stakes business. You never, ever, show your messy, emotional interior. But the rage and humiliation had been too potent. She had looked at Alice, so calm and secure in Julian's protection, and something inside her had snapped. Alice, for her part, did not react as Victoria had expected. There were no tears, no gasp of horror, no trembling retreat into her husband's arms. Instead, she simply held Victoria's gaze. Her head was high, her expression one of profound, clinical disappointment. It was the look a scientist might give a failed experiment. This lack of a dramatic, emotional reaction infuriated Victoria even more. I just mean, Victoria tried to stammer, the adrenaline beginning to curdle into cold dread. From a business perspective, an asset versus liability perspective, it's... Stop, Alice said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence with absolute authority. But Victoria couldn't. It was like a car skidding on ice. She could only steer into the crash. You don't do anything. You're just here. You're a drain on his resources, his time, his focus. You are useless. Julian Thorne, who had been standing in silent, frozen fury, finally moved. But it wasn't toward Victoria. He stepped in front of Alice, not to shield her, but to clear his own line of sight. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Miss Vance," Julian said, and his voice was so low, so devoid of its usual charismatic warmth, that it was unrecognizable. "You are done." What?" Victoria sputtered. "Mr. Thorne. Julian, I didn't mean. I was just—" "You," Julian said, taking a step toward her, "are speaking to the wrong woman." It was at that precise moment that Julian lifted a single, decisive finger. Mr. Harris and Mr. Cole, who had been flanking the small group from the moment Victoria's voice had risen, moved. They were a study in terrifying efficiency. They did not rush. They simply arrived. One moment, they were part of the backdrop. The next, they were flanking Victoria, each man a solid wall of black wool and muscle. "Mr. Thorne?" Mr. Harris asked, his voice a quiet baritone, but it carried. "Ms. Vance's invitation has been revoked," Julian said, his eyes still locked on Victoria. The blood had drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking like a garish mask. "She is trespassing." "No!" Victoria shrieked, the sound echoing horribly in the cavernous room. "Julian, you can't. The green tech merger. I am essential." "You just insulted the chairwoman of this foundation," Julian stated, his voice clipping each word with icy precision. "You insulted the founder of the Aura Project, and," he paused, reaching back to take Alice's hand, "you insulted my wife." "Chairwoman?" Victoria's mind snagged on the word. She's not. The chairwoman is Dr. Walker. An A. Walker." Alice stepped out from behind Julian. Her eyes were clear and bright. "That's me, Victoria. Dr. Alice Walker Thorne. I've been the chairwoman of the Foundation's board for 5 years. I've been running the Aura R&D division from my home office for the last 6 months. The merger you're handling—" Alice took a breath, her hand on her belly. "It was my proposal, based on my algorithm. You weren't hired to lead that acquisition. You were hired to execute my strategy." The blood didn't just drain from Victoria's face. It seemed to leave her body entirely. She swayed, her eyes wide with a horror that was beyond professional. It was existential. She hadn't just insulted the boss's wife. She had insulted the boss. I didn't know," she whispered. "No one told me." "You didn't ask," Alice replied, her voice softening, but not with pity, with finality. "You saw a pregnant woman, and you assumed. You never read the company charter. You never looked up the board's founder. You saw A. Walker on the documents, and Alice Thorne at the party, and you never, not once, did the simple math." "Julian, please," Victoria begged, turning to him. This was the man she respected, the shark she emulated. Julian just looked at her, his expression one of complete and total indifference. He was looking at a line item that had just been zeroed out. "You are arrogant, Ms. Vance, and arrogance is a liability I do not tolerate in my company, or in my home." He nodded to his security. "Mr. Harris, Mr. Cole, throw her out." This time the order was absolute. There was no negotiation. There was no polite, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Mr. Harris, the larger of the two guards, took Victoria's left arm, just above the elbow. Mr. Cole mirrored the movement on her right. Their grips were not violent, but they were as unyielding as steel clamps. Victoria was, for all her high-intensity spin classes and corporate aggression, lifted a millimeter off her designer heels. "No!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Let go of me! This is assault! I'll sue!" "On what grounds?" Julian's voice was conversational, though his eyes were lethal. "Violation of your employment contract's morality clause, or just for being stupid? My legal team will be waiting for your call. They'll be the ones handling your severance, which, I can assure you, is now 0. The word 0 seemed to break Victoria's paralysis. She began to struggle, a frantic, ugly motion that twisted the silk of her expensive dress. "You can't do this. I have contacts. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them. She had nothing, and she knew it. The room watched, a sea of frozen, horrified, and oddly fascinated faces. This was a public execution. "This way, ma'am," Mr. Cole rumbled, and the 2 men began to move. They did not drag her. They walked her, her feet barely skimming the polished marble. She was a doll being carried between 2 giants. They moved with purpose, straight across the great hall, past the Grecian statues, past the gawking senator, and directly toward the main entrance. "My purse!" Victoria cried, realizing her clutch was still on a table. "My phone! It will be mailed to your home address, along with your personal effects from the office," Mr. Harris said, not even turning his head. The efficiency was breathtaking. It was clear this was a well-oiled machine. This was what happened when you crossed Julian Thorne. As they reached the massive arched entryway, the museum's own security, blue-blazered and flustered, rushed forward. Mr. Harris simply flashed the golden T pin on his lapel. "Thorne Security. This individual is being removed from the private event." The museum guard stepped back immediately. They knew who was paying for the entire new wing of their museum. "You'll regret this, Julian," Victoria screamed, one last desperate cry as they propelled her toward the heavy bronze doors. "You need me. That company needs me." "No, Miss Vane," Alice's voice called out, clear and steady from across the hall. "It doesn't." The 2 guards pushed through the doors, flanking Victoria, and marched her out into the humid New York night. The doors swung shut with a heavy, final whoosh, silencing her protests. The silence that remained was absolute. 100 pairs of eyes turned from the door back to Julian and Alice. Julian Thorne straightened his tuxedo jacket. He turned to the small crowd, his face instantly resuming its mask of effortless charm, though his eyes remained cold. "My apologies for that. Regrettable interruption," he said, his voice resonating with easy power. "A staffing matter that, clearly, should have been handled sooner. Now please enjoy the champagne. The Foundation has a very special announcement." He turned, not to the podium, but to his wife. He offered her his arm. "Dr. Walker Thorne, the floor is yours." Alice, who had been called useless not 90 seconds earlier, took his arm. She walked with him past the stunned onlookers, her head high, her hand on her belly, a picture of absolute serenity. She walked to the small stage, where a microphone waited. The room, which had been buzzing with shocked whispers, fell completely silent. They were all finally doing their homework. They were looking at Alice Thorne, and they were, at last, seeing her. Alice stood at the podium, the warmth of the spotlight on her face. She looked out at the sea of powerful, influential, and currently very confused faces. She saw the senator who had patronized her, the tech rivals who had dismissed her, the society wives who had pitied her. She took a slow, deep breath, centered herself, and smiled. "Good evening," she said. Her voice, amplified by the microphone, was warm, clear, and brimming with an unexpected confidence. "For those of you who know me only as Alice Thorne, Julian's wife, I'd like to reintroduce myself. My name is Dr. Alice Walker Thorne, and for the past 5 years, I have had the distinct honor of serving as the chairwoman of the Thorne Foundation. A ripple of audible gasps and murmurs. But before that, she continued, I was the founder and CEO of a small data analysis firm called Aura. More murmurs. Aura was not a small firm. It was the legendary acquisition that had cemented Thorne Industries' dominance in the tech sector. When Thorne Industries acquired Aura, Alice said, her eyes finding Julian's in the front row, they didn't just acquire my patents and my algorithms, they acquired my vision. A vision that this foundation is now dedicated to, finding and funding the next generation of visionaries. She paused, her hand moving to her stomach. This year, the Aura project, which I am particularly proud of, is dedicated to investing in young women in STEM fields. We are here tonight to ensure that the next brilliant mind, the next world-changing engineer, is never, ever overlooked. She didn't mention Victoria. She didn't have to. The subtext was a hammer blow. Tonight, Alice continued, her voice gaining strength, I was reminded that appearances can be deceiving, that a woman's value can be easily misjudged, that someone can look at a woman in a certain condition and see only a liability, a cost, something useless. She let the word hang in the air, but this time it had no power. It was an absurdity. Let me be clear. The woman who founded Aura is the same woman standing before you tonight. The woman who architected the green tech acquisition strategy is the same woman carrying this child. My body is building a life. Yes. But my mind, she smiled, has not taken a day off. A flashback, sharp and clear, hit her. The first time she'd met Julian. It wasn't at a party. It was in a sterile 28th floor boardroom. She was 30 years old, in a severe black suit, her hair pulled back. He was the shark of New York, there to buy her company for a fraction of its worth. Your offer is an insult, Mr. Thorne, she'd said, sliding the folder back across the vast mahogany table. It doesn't account for the predictive applications in energy markets. That's theoretical, he'd countered, impressed despite himself. It's not theoretical to me, she'd replied, pulling up a screen. My algorithm predicted the Texas energy grid failure 6 months before it happened. Your offer is based on what my company is. I'm selling you what it will be. The price is non-negotiable. He had stared at her, not with anger, but with a dawning, terrifying respect. He hadn't just bought the company. He'd spent the next 6 months convincing her to have dinner with him. He fell in love with her mind long before he ever held her hand. Her pregnancy hadn't been an accident. It had been a strategic decision. They had decided to finally start their family. Her stepping back wasn't a demotion. It was a reallocation of resources. From home, she had quietly been running the most sensitive, high-level strategy for the entire Thorne empire. Victoria Vance, in her blind ambition, had only seen the public-facing wife. She had never bothered to look at the org charts, the board meeting minutes, or the company history. She had assumed, and in their world, assumption was death. The future we are building tonight, Alice concluded, her voice ringing with passion, is one where no one is dismissed because of their appearance, their gender, or their condition. The future is built by those who do, and I, ladies and gentlemen, am far from done. She smiled. Thank you. The hall was silent for one stunned beat. Then, the senator who had patronized her leaped to his feet, clapping furiously. In a second, the entire room erupted. It wasn't the polite, obligatory applause of a charity gala. It was a thunderous, rolling ovation. It was a recognition, an apology, an anointing. Julian watched her, his face a portrait of unguarded adoration. He was the most powerful man in the room, and he was, without question, the proudest husband. Alice, the useless wife, had just commanded the room, cemented her authority, and redefined her own public image in a single 3-minute speech. The bronze doors of the Met slammed shut, the thud vibrating in Victoria's bones. The humid August air hit her like a physical blow, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled perfection inside. The sounds of Fifth Avenue, a distant siren, the rumble of a bus, rushed in to fill the silence left by the string quartet. "Ma'am, your car," Mr. Harris said, gesturing to the curb where a black Thorn Industries sedan, one of the lower-level employee cars, not the executive town cars, was waiting. "I'm not," she started to say. But Mr. Cole already had the door open. It was not a request. She stumbled into the back seat, her hands shaking. The door clicked shut, the sound as final as a gavel. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering gala behind. She fumbled for her clutch, but it wasn't there. Of course, it was inside, with her phone, her corporate phone. "My phone," she said to the driver, a partition separating them. "I need my phone." The driver didn't respond. He just drove. She saw her reflection in the darkened window. Her hair, so perfectly sleek hours before, was wild. Her eyes were wide with panic. Her $10,000 dress was creased from where the guards had grabbed her. She was ruined. It wasn't just the job. It was everything. Thorn Industries wasn't a company you just left. It was an ecosystem. To be fired by Julian Thorn, publicly, from his own party. She wasn't just fired. She was blacklisted. She was toxic. She would be a pariah. No rival firm would touch her. She had insulted the man and his wife. Worse, she had insulted his legacy. The car didn't take her home to a sterile, expensive condo. It took her to the Thorn Tower. The lobby was empty, gleaming and cold. "Ma'am," the driver said, getting out and opening her door. "Mr. Harris has instructed me to wait while you retrieve your personal belongings. You have 10 minutes. 10. She was processed. She was a line item. The lobby security guard, a man she had never bothered to learn the name of, had a simple cardboard box waiting for her. "Ms. Vance, your access has been revoked. I will escort you to your office." She rode the silent elevator up to the 42nd floor, her floor, in humiliation. The vast open-plan office was dark, save for the emergency lights. Her own glass-walled office was at the corner. The guard unlocked it. Her things were already in the box, her framed diplomas, a silver pen set, a photo of her. She had no photos, just a small, abstract sculpture, her personal laptop. She grabbed it. She opened it, her fingers fumbling. The building's Wi-Fi, the one she had access to an hour ago, now rejected her. Access denied. She tethered to her personal phone, which she'd thankfully had in a pocket. Her corporate email. This account has been deactivated. Her corporate cloud. Invalid credentials. She had been digitally, completely excised. A new email pinged on her personal account. It was from the New York Post. "Ms. Vance, we're running a story on your immediate dismissal from the Thorn Gala. We have a quote from a Thorn spokesperson. Ms. Vance's conduct was in violation of our company's core values. We wish her the best in her future endeavors." Do you have a comment? The story was already out. Thorn's PR machine wasn't just good, it was a fortress. They had spun the narrative before she was even in the car. She wasn't a victim. She was a liability that had been handled. She sank into a chair, the box at her feet. And then she remembered. Dr. A. Walker. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Dr. Alice Walker Thorn. The search results flooded in. Articles from Wired, Forbes, MIT Technology Review. The quiet genius behind Aura. Alice Walker's vision for predictive AI. Why Julian Thorne paid $3 billion for a startup and its CEO. There were pictures. A younger Alice in a lab coat. Alice on a panel with tech billionaires. Alice and Julian not at a gala, but at a press conference, signing the acquisition papers. She was listed as co-chair and chief strategy officer, Thorne Industries. She hadn't been fired by the CEO. She had been fired by the chairwoman. The woman she had called useless was, on paper, her superior. A cold, sick dread, heavier than any she had ever known, settled in her stomach. Her arrogance, her assumptions, her lazy, sexist dismissal, it had all conspired to bring her to this moment. Her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Vance. The voice was smooth, male with a slight British accent. That was quite a performance. Who is this? She whispered. My name is Sebastian Croft, the man said. Victoria's heart stopped. Sebastian Croft, the only man Julian Thorne considered a true rival, the CEO of Croft Global. I saw the news alerts, Croft said, a hint of amusement in his voice. It seems you're available. You made a powerful enemy tonight, Victoria. But in doing so, you've made a very interesting introduction. What do you want? You're radioactive in New York, Croft said bluntly. But I'm not in New York. I'm in London, and I happen to have an opening for someone who isn't afraid to get her hands dirty, someone who knows Thorne's playbook. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a different kind of trap. You want me to work for you? I want your intel, Victoria. I want your aggression. You tried to take out the Queen and missed, but you showed you were willing to pull the trigger. I like that. A car will be at your apartment in 1 hour. Be in it, or enjoy your retirement. The line clicked dead. Victoria Vance looked at the cardboard box that held her former life. She had been thrown out. But she had, in the most twisted way possible, just been given a new, darker path. She closed the laptop, picked up the box, and walked out of the office for the last time. 3 months later, the penthouse apartment was quiet, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of a newborn. The chaos of the gala felt like a distant, slightly absurd dream. The New York autumn light, soft and golden, streamed into the nursery. Alice sat in a comfortable rocking chair, her daughter, Lily Walker Thorne, sleeping soundly on her chest. The scent of new motherhood, milk and powder, had replaced the sharp, metallic smell of lilies and perfume. This, she thought, was the real power. This quiet, unshakable, fundamental connection. The nursery door opened softly, and Julian entered. He had shed his suit jacket, his sleeves were rolled up, and he looked, for the first time in months, completely relaxed. He didn't speak, just came over and kissed the top of Alice's head, then rested his hand on Lily's tiny back. They stood in silence for a moment. A family. How's our girl? He whispered. She's perfect, Alice murmured. How's the Empire? Julian's smile was wide. He moved to the window, looking out over Central Park. The Green Tech merger is complete, finalized this morning. We closed for 30% under the initial valuation. Alice looked up. 30%? How? Their patents were solid. They were, Julian agreed, but their key partner, Sebastian Croft, mysteriously pulled his funding 3 weeks ago, left them completely over-leveraged and desperate to sell. We just had to wait. Alice smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Croft pulled out? That's surprising. He was so aggressive on that deal. It seems, Julian said, turning back to her, his eyes glittering with shared understanding, that he had a sudden, very expensive internal disruption. He hired a new VP for his US acquisitions. A real shark, I'm told. "Oh?" Alice said, adjusting Lily's blanket. "Yes. A woman named Victoria Vance. Apparently she went in, guns blazing, tried to poach half our green tech team, violated 3 different non-compete clauses, and triggered an internal audit at Croft Global that exposed, well, a lot of his more creative accounting." Alice's smile widened. "What a shame." "A terrible shame," Julian agreed solemnly. By the time Croft realized the asset he'd hired was actually a liability, her words, I believe, he'd lost 2 divisions and was forced to liquidate his shares in green tech to cover the losses. She was, as it turns out, just as useless to him as she thought you were to me. The final twist. Alice hadn't just won the night, she had won the war. Her strategy, set in motion months before, had always accounted for Victoria's blind ambition. She had known Victoria would be arrogant. She had known Croft would see her public firing as an opportunity to poach a weapon. And she had known that Victoria, unleashed in a new, unfamiliar system, would be a chaos agent. She had let her enemy's arrogance and her rival's opportunism destroy each other. All from her home office, while 8 months pregnant. "So," Julian said, kneeling beside her chair, "Madam Chairwoman, what is your next order?" He was teasing, but it was true. The board, in a meeting Alice had attended via video call just 2 days before giving birth, had officially and unanimously voted to confirm her as the permanent chairwoman of the board of Thorn Industries. Julian, as CEO, now officially reported to her. Alice looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. She then looked at her husband, the man who ran the visible empire, while she ran the one beneath it. "Your first order, Mr. Thorn," Alice said, her voice soft but absolute, "is to go and change this diaper. It's a liability." Julian laughed, a genuine, joyous sound that filled the quiet room. He gently scooped his daughter from her chest. "Yes, Mom," he said, kissing his wife. "Consider it handled." Alice leaned her head back, closing her eyes. The empire was secure, the legacy was safe, and the useless woman, the ornament, the liability, was in the end the one holding all the strings. 6 months had passed. The sterile, silent terror of the gala had faded, replaced by the warm, chaotic reality of new life. Lily Walker Thorne was now a gurgling, bright-eyed infant, with a laugh that could disarm a hostile takeover. The penthouse, once a quiet sanctuary of glass and steel, was now softened by playmats and the faint, sweet smell of baby formula. Alice, however, had found a new, sharper equilibrium. Her role as mother had not subsumed her. It had forged her. The protective instinct she felt for her daughter had magnified her protective instinct for the company she had built and the empire she now officially chaired. Today was the first annual shareholders' meeting since her official ascension to chairwoman. The grand ballroom of the Thorn Tower was packed. Julian sat to her left at the long dais, the picture of a supportive CEO. He was, in title, reporting to her. In practice, they were a united front. And so, Alice was saying, her voice calm and resonant, our Q4 projections, driven by the successful integration of the green tech division, are the strongest in the company's history. We are projecting 22% growth year over year. She was in her element. She had the data, the strategy, and the full confidence of the board. The room was settled, impressed. The Victoria Vance incident, as the press had dubbed it, was a distant memory. Alice had proven herself not just a strategist, but a leader. "Thank you, Madam Chairwoman," a board member, Mark Jennings, said. "A truly stellar report. We now open the floor to questions from our shareholders." A hand went up in the third row, a man in an impeccably tailored, dark grey suit. He was not a familiar face from these meetings. As he stood, a ripple of recognition and shock passed through the front rows. Alice's blood didn't run cold. It sharpened. "Sebastian Croft," the man said, his voice a smooth, British-accented purr. "Croft Global. I trust my credentials are on file. I've recently become one of your partners." Julian stiffened beside her. Croft. He had spent the last 6 months cleaning up the mess Victoria Vance had made of his company, and now he was here. He had quietly bought a 5% stake in Thorn Industries, not enough to be a threat, but just enough to be a problem. "Mr. Croft," Alice said, her tone perfectly even, as if greeting an old friend. "Welcome. We're always pleased to have new investors. Do you have a question?" "An observation, rather," Croft said, smiling. It was a predator's smile, all teeth, no warmth. "First, I must congratulate you, Madam Chairwoman, on the quarterly numbers, of course, but also on your new arrival. A beautiful child." The room tensed. This was not a business comment. "Thank you, Mr. Croft," Alice said, her eyes narrowing. "Was that your observation?" "My observation," he continued, "is that this company, this truly impressive machine, has been running at peak performance, and it has done so, largely, it seems, while its new chairwoman has been, shall we say, attending to other matters." The barb was unmistakable. It was Victoria Vance's insult, but wielded with a surgeon's precision, not a butcher's. "Julian," Croft said, turning his gaze to her husband, "your hands-on leadership during this transition has been nothing short of heroic. You have truly steered the ship. Which brings me to my concern. A ship, as we know, cannot have 2 captains, especially when one is occupied." Julian started to lean toward his microphone, his face darkening, but Alice laid a single, calm hand on his forearm. "My table. My game." "Your concern is noted, Mr. Croft," Alice said. "Please get to your point." "My point," Croft said, his smile widening, "is one of stability. The market values presence. It values total focus. This company's value is built on the tireless work of your CEO. I and several other investors I have spoken with are concerned that your new priorities, Madam Chairwoman, will create a division of focus. We cannot afford sentiment in the boardroom." He was painting her as a part-timer, a hobbyist, a mother who was playing at being chairwoman. "Therefore," Croft announced, "I would like to propose a formal review of the chairwoman's active engagement clause in the company charter, and perhaps, to ensure stability, a motion to create a co-chair position. One to be filled by Mr. Thorne, of course, to formalize the leadership that he is already providing." It was brilliant. He was attempting a coup, not by attacking, but by helping. He was using her new motherhood as a weapon, framing her as a risk and Julian as the de facto savior. The older, more traditional shareholders in the room shifted, their faces etched with sudden, pained consideration. Alice let the silence stretch. She looked at Croft, then at the board, then at the shareholders. She slowly walked from behind the dais to the central podium, as she had at the gala. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice soft, "I thank you for your investment, and I thank you for your concern." She clicked a small remote in her hand. The main screen, which had shown the quarterly profits, changed. It was now a complex, flowing chart of market data. "You're right about one thing," Alice said. "The market values focus, and I have been very, very focused." She pointed to a cluster of red on the screen. "This is your portfolio, Mr. Croft. Specifically, your holding company's liquidation of assets in the Asian energy market 3 months ago. A move, as my team and I predicted, that was forced upon you to cover the catastrophic losses from your internal disruptions. Croft's smile faltered. And this, Alice clicked again, and a parallel chart appeared in green, is us. You mentioned I've been attending to other matters. This is correct. While feeding my daughter at 3 a.m., I was also running a new predictive model. The Aura 2 engine. It predicted your fire sale a week before it happened. She turned to the room. While Mr. Croft was desperately dumping his shares in Greentech's main supplier, Thorn Industries, under my absentee leadership, was quietly buying them. We bought his entire position for pennies on the dollar. When he announced his losses, the market panicked. When we announced our new position 2 days later, the stock rebounded 40%, a net Q4 gain for this company of $1.4 billion. She faced Croft directly. Your concern, Mr. Croft, is that I was occupied. The truth is that while you were trying to recover from the liability you hired, I was busy turning your failure into our profit. My distraction, as you so delicately put it, paid for the new R&D wing. The room was silent as a tomb. Julian Thorne was grinning from ear to ear. You, Alice said, her voice dropping, are a shark, Mr. Croft. We all know this. But you are a shark who has just swum into a whale's territory. You are not a partner. You are a wounded rival trying to sow dissent because you lost, and you lost badly. You did not underestimate my CEO. You underestimated me. Again. She turned back to the board. Mr. Croft's proposal for a review is noted. I, in turn, as chairwoman, would like to propose a shareholder vote. A vote of no confidence in any board proposal brought by Croft Global, on the grounds that his position constitutes a clear and present conflict of interest. We can hold that vote now, or Mr. Croft can withdraw his motion and quietly take his seat. Sebastian Croft stood, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He had been publicly, surgically, and utterly vivisected. He had come in with a knife and found himself facing a tank. He gave a stiff, tiny nod. My concerns appear to have been premature. I withdraw the motion. Thank you, Alice said, her smile returning, warm and brilliant. Now, if there are no other substantive questions, let's move on to the dividend announcement. As Alice returned to her seat, Julian leaned over, his voice a low whisper in her ear. Useless, my arse, he murmured. That was terrifying, and I loved every second of it. Alice just smiled, picking up her water glass. The market had been handled, the shark had been neutered, and it was almost noon. She was right on schedule to make it home for Lily's lunchtime feeding. Thank you for listening to this story. We all know a situation where someone was judged unfairly, where appearances led to a terrible miscalculation. The story of Alice Thorne is a powerful reminder that true strength often lies in what people don't see. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. What did you think of Victoria's downfall? Was it pure karma, or was she a victim of her own ambition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of karma, drama, and unexpected justice, please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.